unity of our territory, but also unity of our people. I couldn't speak highly enough of our young people. They're not going to put retail outlets and offices into the GPO. We have to fight that. Students don't know what will the fee be.
Well, Judy Vacarja, Falta Gaji, and Cade Epidsode, the Glorna Hogra, is Michelle Taylor, August.
It's Michelle May.
And we're very honoured to have our first guest of the podcast, TD for Dublin Central and Uachtaráin Féin, Marilyn McDonald.
And I can't tell you how happy I am. I'm your first guest. I consider this to be an absolute honour to be the first guest on this epic podcast.
So in 2018, you became the first female leader in Féin. And around that time, a lot of the interviews focused in on that. Just looking back now, like, you know, what do you think that moment was like? Like, what did Gerry Adams do for gender equality in Irish politics when appointing new leader?
So I wasn't actually the first woman leader, the first female leader. The first female leader was a Cork woman, and I think you should run a competition on this podcast to see who can identify and name that woman for you. So I wasn't the first, just to say that. Maybe the first in more contemporary or modern times. And that was considered a big deal. And I suppose given the fact that women for so long have been so badly underrepresented in public life and political life, you know, it was very, very significant. Maybe more significantly was the fact that the Uachtaráin and Bas Uachtaráin of Sinn Féin were both women. So that raised some eyebrows for sure. So I think myself, but then the partnership of myself and Michelle, it provoked conversations, which I think was great. It also took a bit of getting used to, a bit of adjustment, because Gerry Adams was and remains such a giant of Irish political life, of Irish society, and Martin McGuinness, that, you know, there were very significant shoes to fill. But as I said at the time, we brought our own shoes with us. So I think it's important that women and girls, men and boys as well, young people of from every background, that we make politics as exciting and as inclusive as we possibly can. So we've tried to work really hard on that.
Just also on the sort of topic of female leaders, we're yet to have a female Taoiseach.
Yes.
And how do you think,
Drum roll.
You know, when that moment does happen, you know, what do you think that will do for sort of gender equality within Irish politics?
Well, I would hope that we're not far off having our first woman Taoiseach, and of course it'll be significant for women, and for girls and for Irish society. But I think it will bear an even deeper significance than just gender politics. I think it goes beyond that, because of course we're about Irish unity, we're about transforming Ireland, we're about achieving the Republic, we're about independence, we're about our freedom, and all of these things will be realised over the next, I'm going to say 5-6 years. The next decade is certainly absolutely formative. So we didn't make it into government this time. We have to now, we have regrouped, we're working very hard, we're leading the opposition again, and we need to get there next time. But it is always, of course, about social equality. It's about building the society that we all want to live and grow in. But it's about Irish unity, about getting those referendums, it's about winning those referendums. By the way, we may not have had a woman Taoiseach, a female Taoiseach yet, but I am the first woman to have led the opposition in the Dáil. So that'll tell you, it only took a century.
Right, so moving on to more recent developments, we've recently seen Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil talk about raising the student contribution fees in the South. I think talking to any student, North and South, they will tell you they're struggling with cost of living. So what impact do you think that will have on students and on their families especially?
Well, I think the immediate impact that it's having is that there's this terrible uncertainty, because the government were kind of saying, well, we're not going to keep the reduction in fees, but we're not going to raise the fees, which when you think of it makes absolutely no sense. So like even now as we're speaking, students don't know what will the fee be, what will the student contribution be. And look, our job is to make education more accessible, not to put up barriers for students. of all ages coming into the educational system. So it's a backward step. It's as simple as that. And you're right, students, like everybody else, are really, really under the hammer with the cost of living crisis. And by the way, the government haven't just threatened, promised to raise the student fees. They've also made a change in terms of the private rental market, which means that rents for students are going to be more and more expensive. So, you know, the knock-on effect ultimately, if this continues in this direction, is that students will choose not to go to college or will have more limited options. Will say, well, I'm here, but I can't go to Dublin or to Galway or whatever the case may be. So it's bad news. And by the way, it's happening at a time when the Irish state has never had more resources. Surely to God, you invest in your people, you invest in your young people, you invest in education, and you make it more attractive and easier for people to participate, rather than taking actions that ultimately, I think, exclude people.
Yeah. Well, staying on that, access to education, I think there are undeniable barriers for students from the north wanting to go south and vice versa. I think if you look at the A level to CAO, like point conversions and the other way around, it really feels like that was a system made by someone who doesn't either know one of the systems or maybe both. So what would Sinn Féin's plan be there? How would we make all Ireland education a real thing?
So we have to remove all of those barriers, and we have to look at education in a truly inclusive way and say, right, so if you're in Derry or if you're in Strabane or if you're in West Belfast, how do you access all of the options available? So questions around points, you know, equivalences and so on, just need to be scrutinised, and the system just needs to be properly aligned. And look, you're always going to have problems and barriers for so long as our island is partitioned. So you have to actually make the effort, and you have to have a consciousness. The system has to be conscious that those barriers are there and straighten them out. But if you're coming from the point of view, if the ministers north and south are coming from the point of view of let's give every person access and their chance, well then you simply identify all of those barriers. And by the way, students have identified them for us. So the work's done. All we need to do now is bring the solution, and they're administrative largely. So it's about will. It's about seeing these barriers and then having the will to just fix them.
So a lot of people around are calling this the decade of opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
How could a United Ireland deliver for young people, and how can young people help shape that future, not just inherit it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I like that framing of it, because this isn't your inheritance. It is your legitimate right, but it's your future. And young people, more than any of the rest of us, have the most to gain and arguably the most to lose if we don't get this right. But we can get it right, and we will get it right. What will it deliver? It will deliver an economic opportunity, a social opportunity, a political opportunity. It will deliver sustained long-term peace, real freedom for our country, unity of our territory, but also unity of our people. And all of those sometimes can sound very much like cliches, but you know what? They're not. We can actually achieve these things. We can get this done, and we won't get it done unless we have very active young people paying attention, young people making very, very clear what the Ireland of the future has to be for them. So I would encourage activism, I would encourage questioning, I would encourage young people to challenge us, challenge all of us, and to set the bar high. So I have for a long time, and you've heard me say this again, but just roll with me and let me say it one more time. Like, I go to Australia and elsewhere, and I meet the best and brightest of young people working abroad, you know, building their lives there. And many, many of them say, you know, I'd love to come home. I'm ready to come home, but I can't. So why can't they? Because they look and they say, well, how am I going to pay for housing? What's my opportunity going to be? And they're not hearing from Ireland, particularly in the 26 counties, a government that's saying, come back. We want you here. We need you here. And I think we need to turn that around really, really quickly. And we need to be clear, and we need to have a conversation as a society. How do we make this the best place for our young people to live, to work, to build their own families, to contribute and to build our society and to build that new Ireland, to build that united Ireland. A huge amount of this is going to fall on the shoulders of your generation, a brilliant generation, talented, innovative, energetic. I have so much confidence, so much faith in you, but I also know that for you to flourish and to do this, we need to get our house in order in the here and now. So that's a big challenge for my generation, but I couldn't speak highly enough of our young people, and I am really sorry that in housing and in many other areas, at a time, as I say, when resources have never been more abundant, you're still being let down, and we are going to change that. I am going to fight that corner for you every inch of the way, but you need to lead it. You need to be there as well. So I just encourage activism, through OGRA, through Sinn Féin, and through the many other, whether it's Dram, Jarek, whatever the vehicle is, young people need to now assert yourselves. We need to hear from you.
Yeah, I think that's dead right. You'd be hard to find someone our age who doesn't know someone who's in their family or their friends who has moved to Australia or New Zealand.
I know, and I've met young people in the course of the last general election. One of the conversations I had was with the young woman who had a job here. Her partner had stayed here, but she told me, she said, it's really lonely because my friends are gone, and we can't have that. Like, that's not good enough. That's just not good enough. So shout that at the political system, please.
Well, moving on to our last question, the GPO. The building where the Republic was declared, what do you make of the campaign to save the GPO? And do you think what's happening there with the government reflects a bigger issue and disrespect towards Ireland's revolutionary history?
I absolutely do. I think you have still a phenomenon of free statism, a complete denial of Irish history, a denial of our revolutionary past, a denial of our colonial experience, almost as though we're to develop collective amnesia and just move on from that. And missing entirely that it is in fact that past, that history, that tradition that is so valuable to Ireland in terms of who we are, our place in the world, what we bring to the international agenda as Europeans, members of the European Union, but different fundamentally from so many of our partners. We were colonised, not colonisers. We suffered conflict, famine, division, partition, but we've always managed to rise and rise again and to overcome these things. So the political establishment doesn't like the idea of these firm Irish traditional values of being asserted generation after generation. I think that the same values that animate young people now as animated young revolutionaries in 1916 and in the 1920s. So what the government will not respect, we have to really reverence and respect. So they're not going to put retail outlets and offices into the GPO. We have to fight that. Remember, this is the same mentality, the same establishment that at one stage was going to knock down a very famous prison, Kilmainham jail. They thought that was, inconsequential. How wrong were they there? And they're wrong here. So this is going to be a mighty campaign. And I have no doubt again that young people will be to the fore of that. The GPO should be a monument to Ireland's struggles, our revolution, our past, but also our future, based in a big cultural quarter. And remember, Moore Street, Moore Lane, the terrace is just around the corner. All of that area is sacred, and we're going to stand up and protect it.
Yeah, well, Sinead, thank you very much for coming on.
My pleasure. And listen, all more, because you should enter.